about 15 minutes at the end for question and answer. Please use the question and answer feature in Zoom. You can ask questions throughout, but we will be kind of saving that question time for the end for both speakers. So thank you so much, and take it away, Wyatt.
Okay, well, thanks, Laurel, and thanks to Lee and you for organizing this and inviting Oregon to give an update. Hi, everyone. My name is Wyatt Williams. I work for Oregon Department of Forestry. I'm the invasive species specialist, and I also want to say that a lot of this work has been supported and completed by our two EAB support specialists, Kat Bethea and Matt Mills. Matt is on the webinar here that can help with some questions if we have it. And I'm just going to jump into it. If you're here, you're probably a little bit familiar with emerald ash borer, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. So EAB was first detected in the US in 2002 and has done quite a number on killing ash trees across a lot of the United States. Over 100 million trees have been killed. And in some areas, up to 95 or more % of the trees have been killed. And there are 16 ash species in North America, and all of them are at risk from EAB. And it is our costliest forest pest in the history of the United States at this point. And so it is a highly destructive wood borer. And again, it kills true ash trees by girdling and feeding under the bark, essentially robbing the tree of energy that's produced in the foliage and spreading throughout the tissues of the tree. For the most part, as a one-year life cycle, although we are seeing some individuals take 2 years to complete development. In the summer is when the adults emerge and fly. So that is our flight period. They lay eggs, the larvae hatch during the summer. And then something interesting is that it overwinters as larvae. And then in May, it goes through this pre-pupal stage and then completes its development into an adult. I really like this image because it shows the cryptic nature of EAB and how it's hard to detect early. This is from Rainbow Ecoscience here, but you can imagine peeling back part of the tree over 4, 5, 6 years. The infestation starts kind of small and you can't notice it for the first few years. So the larvae are feeding under the bark, but it's not until about year 3 where you might see some dieback from the amount of larvae that are feeding on the cambium and phloem. And then by years 4, 5, 6 is when we start seeing some tree mortality. So this is when it starts to become apparent to people. By that time, the insects have flown off and are infesting other trees. So this is one of the reasons why it's so hard to detect early, because we don't see the dieback until several years later after the first infestation in the tree. So again, some history in the United States, first detected in the Detroit, Michigan area in 2002. And despite a lot of aggressive eradication efforts by the USDA and eastern states, it kept escaping containment lines and has spread now to over 35 states. Some notable occurrences in 2017 detected on the Front Range of Colorado, and then in 2022 is when we had our first detection in Oregon in Forest Grove. In Canada, 2024 is when it was detected in Vancouver in the Pacific Northwest. And if you kind of zoom in, which is this image on the left, here is Washington right here. So it's just across the border from Washington, and Maria is going to be giving an update from the Washington perspective. But just for your knowledge, this is the other known location in the Pacific Northwest, is in Vancouver, British Columbia. Okay, getting back to Oregon here, Forest Grove, June of 2022. That's this northwest area up here. And then in 2024, it was detected on the border of these two counties, Marion and Clackamas County, in an area that we're calling Butte Creek. And then this summer, we detected our first detection in Multnomah County in Portland, East Portland. And right now we have 5 counties that are under quarantine for emerald ash borer. Oregon does have one species of native ash Oregon ash, Fraxus latifolia. Here on this map, we have mapped all the Huck 12 watersheds where we have confirmed presence of Fraxus latifolia. It's up until EAB arrived, it was a pretty poorly studied tree, but since 2022, there's been a lot of attention now being paid to this tree, and we're still adding new watersheds, but this is the bulk of the range for our native Oregon ash. It's our only native ash tree, like I said. It's a riparian tree. It grows along every stream, every river in Western Oregon. It appears to be really important in bank stabilization and shading. There are some T&E habitats for salmonid species in the range of Oregon ash, and it has been used as a cultural resource for by our native tribes. So this is what it looks like, kind of where it grows in the Willamette Valley. As I said, every creek, every stream has Oregon ash in the Willamette Valley. And these areas are already highly fragmented and altered from agriculture and other activities. And so Oregon ash forms these riparian corridors and provides a lot of connectivity for wildlife that if those trees weren't there, then it would be even more fragmented. It also can form these monocultures, so to speak, these ash swales in really heavy clay soils. It's a tree that can grow where no other trees can occur. And so you can imagine the loss of these trees is going to have a significant impact in those habitats. So on June 30th, 2022, Oregon Department of Forestry received a report EAB at an elementary school in Forest Grove, and we were on the scene that day. Our entomologist lives in nearby in Portland, and then I visited the next day as well. And we had all the classic signs of EAB. We had the D-shaped exit holes, we had woodpecker holes, we had bark splits and galleries. We even had adults flying in these landscape trees. There were 16 trees in the parking lot of this school, and all of them were infested. And you can see the canopy dieback in those trees as well. So coincidentally, we at Oregon Department of Forestry had received some bill infrastructure funding, and we were able to put that money to good work. We implemented a SLAM program, slowing ash mortality, and Nathan Seegert and other folks from the U.S. Forest Service really helped us develop this. But basically, we set up a perimeter around Forest Grove, and we girdled over 200 trees over a couple of years. Those girdled trees drew in beetles. We were able to survey those trees and really get a better idea of where it was on the landscape. But it also provided some control. We were able to slow down the spread of emerald ash borer moving into the Portland metro area this way. So this is a very effective method at slowing the spread. However, it's very labor intensive, requires some stable funding, which we ran out of that bill infrastructure funding, and a credible amount of coordination with a bunch of private landowners to get this work done. But yeah, basically for SLAM, you have to girdle these trees in the spring, makes them very attractive to any flying adults. We let the adults attack and the females lay eggs on those. And then in the fall or early winter, we went back and felled those trees and harvested these bolts right here. And this is Nathan Seegert right here, who came out to help us, and then painstakingly peel all those bolts, and you can observe individual larvae. And so we were able to look at the population density and where it was spreading on the landscape, as well as slow down the spread for those 2 years. So it was very successful for 2 years, but we are not continuing this anymore because of funding, and also the population is growing, as you will see here in a minute. So no new detections in 2023 other than around Forest Grove. But here's what the aftermath in Forest Grove looks like. You know, we're getting some of these stark photos here in the city of Forest Grove. Lots of tree removals happening on our city streets in Forest Grove and surrounding communities. Then fast forward to 2024, an arborist tipped us off to a possible infestation in the Butte Creek area. And when we arrived, we saw pockets of these Oregon ash and riparian areas that have just been completely hammered by EAB and a very, very high density of EAB. And this population has probably been here for about 10 years or so. Just some more pictures from that Butte Creek infestation. Butte Creek happens to be the border between two counties. So both counties were included in the quarantine at that time. But lots of canopy dieback. For 2025, we conducted a trapping survey. Well, we have been trapping for EAB in Oregon since around 2010 or so. But this year was one of our largest trapping efforts. There were 23 agencies that participated in the survey. A lot of these were local agencies, cities, soil water conservation districts, other state agencies, federal agencies. And so it was an amazing cooperative effort. Had over 300 traps on the landscape. I put up this web map here, and if you want to go look at all of our traps, you can. This is all public information here. But we had our highest number of positives in the history of our survey program here. We had 9 positives, all in the northern Willamette Valley. And the positives started showing up in mid-July at our mid-season trap checks from our cooperators. So you can see there was like a 3 on July 15th here. We had one July 16th. But yeah, just spread all around this northern Willamette Valley area. All of these 9 trap positives really added to our knowledge of the range expansion of EAB. So we were able to add this to our Oregon EAB web map. And this is another public map, and I asked Lee to put this in the chat here. So if you want to find out some more details about where these trees are, you can go look at that map. What's interesting about our EAB web map is that we have a lot of different layers on there that the public can toggle on and off. One of the most useful layers that we're finding is we have this management layer, which I'll talk about here in a second. That's what those color codes are: the pink, the dark blue, and the light blue. These management layers will tell people exactly what they need to be doing as far as EAB management. So that's been really useful in helping us answer questions from the public. Just want to talk a little bit about that first detection in Portland, which came this summer. On August 14th, we got a confirmed trap. This site was tipped off to us again by another professional arborist who had seen some larvae feeding under the bark. We couldn't get a positive identification from that report, so we set a trap. The city of Portland and ODF worked together on trapping in the area, and we did get an adult on that trap. So on August 14th, we declared Multnomah County with a positive, and that tipped off a media day. And I think we had 6 news stations there, lots of media following that. So a very busy summer for us for EAB in 2025. So trapping is one way we survey for EAB, but we have 2 other main ways that we collect reports. This one has been very, very useful, and this is our public reporting hotline. This is set up from the Oregon Invasive Species Council. This is a reporting hotline for all invasive species. And the picture on the left is an example report that we receive. So in 2025, we've had almost 200 reports filed to the public hotline. A lot of those we just can't identify because the pictures were too poor or there were no pictures included in the report. And then we had a lot of negatives. Not sure what's going on there. But yeah, we had 9 positives from the public as well. So 9 trap positives, 9 positive reports from the public on our hotline. So all of these reports keep us busy too, checking and engaging with the public. And then finally, we have a Survey 123 form for natural resource professionals. That's for our agency, the Oregon Department of Agriculture. Any of the local governments can get this Survey 123. And we've have over 5,000 trees in this database. A lot of those came in the first couple of years when we had that bill infrastructure funding, and we had a lot of people that we were paying to survey for trees. But this year, with some of our reduced funding, we haven't been using this Survey 123 as much. But we did have 85 individual tree checks, and there were 7 positives. So this is another tool that we use for surveying EAB. So just to kind of summarize our detection summary for 2025 in Oregon, again, we have our 3 different main survey methods right here. The hotline is for the public, and then professionals can use all 3 of them if they choose. We had just over 600 observations with 25 positives across all of those survey methods. So the picture on the right is a picture of a EAB adult that was submitted on the public hotline. So the public is getting more and more aware of what to look for. We've had a ton of media here in Oregon, very, very high interest in EAB in Oregon. And now I want to talk about our web map that I mentioned earlier. And this is, again, a public a map that you can go check out on your own when you have time. I just wanted to zoom in on this Butte Creek area right here. So the bottom right point down here, this was a trap positive that was added this year on BLM land. On our map, we have these EAB management action zones that we developed, and that's what the color codes are. It's a 1 mile, 5 mile, and 25 mile buffer around every confirmed positive. And if you click on that, it will tell the landowner or the land manager exactly what they need to be doing. So for this 5 mile expansion area, we say EAB will moving in this area, or it might be here already, and that people should be selecting trees to inject with an insecticide, replacing trees with non-host species, and that this is an area where we concentrate our traps and any sort of girdle tree surveys. So those are the 3 management action zones. And again, this has really helped us with some of our FAQs on what people should be doing about EAB in their area. So we do have a quarantine that's administered by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. They're the quarantine enforcing agency for Oregon. And it's restricting the movement of host material, which includes ash, olive, and fringe tree, a landscaping plant. So that material cannot move from inside the quarantine to outside the quarantine area. This map is already a little out of date because it doesn't include Portland, which is in Multnomah County, which is in the quarantine. The quarantine also requires some sort of treatment if you are trying to move material, and a compliance agreement with the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and also limits the ash tree removal and pruning during the non-flight period for EAB. We have done a ton of public education, and thanks to the Don't Move Firewood, we have developed specific materials for Oregon for not moving firewood. We have gone to over 50 training events and outreach events in 2025. About 5,000 people have been targeted at our trainings and outreach events. And we always bring our Don't Move Firewood material to those events. So why should we not move ashwood? If you remember back to the life cycle, it said it's interesting that it's overwinters as late instar larvae. A lot of times those larvae burrow into the sapwood. Most of the time they're just feeding right here on the edge of the xylem. They're feeding on the vascular cambium and the phloem. But when they overwinter, oftentimes they will burrow into the sapwood up to about an inch or a half inch. And this is how they're spread long distances in firewood. People unknowingly transport firewood containing EAB. So this is why we recommend people chipping their wood or heat treating firewood for 160 degrees for 60 minutes. So Oregon was prepared, or as prepared as we could be for EAB. Trapping began, I thought it was 2010. I think 2008 might have been our first like pilot year for trapping. And in 2018 is when we released our statewide plan, which is still available on our website. Yeah, we did develop a website, OregonEAB.com, which has our plan and just a ton of information on EAB identification and management. So that was actually part of our plan, was to develop this website. So the plan has been out since 2018, and it's a great resource for our local governments and the public. In 2019, Oregon Department of Forestry received a grant from the U.S. Forest Service to start collecting seeds from across the range of Oregon ash to put into gene banks and to provide to researchers studying genetic resistance. 2022 is when we had our first detection in Forest Grove, and 2023 is when we started our SLAM efforts, and we Oregon Department of Agriculture did the first releases of biocontrol. And then 2024 is when we had our next kind of discovery along Butte Creek, and then this year in Portland. So part of the plan for the emerald ash borer for Oregon was to have a task force, and that started in September of 2022. So just a little over a month after the first detection, Oregon Department of Agriculture formed a task force, and it has met monthly since September of 2022. It's coordinated through the Oregon Invasive Species Council, and we have over 40 agencies that are participating every month on this task force. The task force was quickly divided into subcommittees who have their own meeting schedule and participants. And so they meet on their own and then report every month at the task force meeting. But our main subcommittees are the survey monitoring. We have a wood waste and wood utilization subcommittee, research, communication, and then two local groups, one for the Forest Grove area and one for the Butte Creek area. And they also meet to strategize and coordinate efforts. I mentioned part of the plan was to have a website, and we did purchase a URL, which is really easy to communicate to people. It's OregonEAB.com, and it is a Esri-based website. Our GIS program here at Oregon Department of Forestry has been instrumental in helping us get this going, and we have a huge number of visits to our website. After the Portland discovery, I think we had 4,000 visits to our website in one day. But we have everything on our website that people need to know about EAB in Oregon, how to identify ash, how to identify EAB, how to report EAB, how to manage EAB, the current map. So this is our one-stop shop for everything EAB in Oregon. So for management options, I mentioned biological control, which was started in 2023 by Oregon Department of Agriculture in cooperation with USDA APHIS. And this year we've had almost 360 releases at 8 different sites. So 3 different species of biological control agents have been introduced. Thousands and thousands of adults have been released. And we are looking at the results of those releases this winter to see if any of those populations have established on their own and are reproducing. So we know that biological control can provide 25–30% predation on EAB. So this is a big step in integrated pest management for EAB in Oregon. We also have done workshops on stem injections. This is one of our employees at Oregon Department of Forestry right here, Allison Harrell, demonstrating how to do a systemic trunk injection. This is a preventative measure, and it will kill any EAB that are attacking and burrowing into this tree. Our urban and community forestry program has been great in getting the word out to our communities. And one of our big messages is that you can't manage what you don't know that you have. And so we have at Oregon Department of Forestry free to the cities as a tree plotter tool. This is an example from the city of Cornelius. And if you look on the right here, they have a lot of ash, hundreds of species of ash that have been mapped. And this is the first step in managing EAB, is knowing where the ash are and how many ash you have in your city. After that, we can help cities develop an action plan, and that's what we've done here. So this is just an example from the city of Cornelius, where we have these natural areas surrounding the city here. This is the Tualatin River, and a lot of the tree canopy that you see here is ash. And so we'll help trees develop these management plans where we have these high risk areas, moderate risk, and low risk. So in the high risk, you want to do your tree felling while the trees are still alive, because ash trees get really brittle when they die. This is where you can do your stem injections, your treatments. And then in other areas, you might not have no management because it's too costly to do management in all these areas. So we help the cities and local governments develop these management plans. So one question we get a lot is, our ash are going to be okay though, right? And the answer is no. We are not expecting them to be okay. We can our only hope is to slow the mortality and prepare our communities. That's our best strategy. So in some of these areas like Forest Grove and Butte Creek, we might be right here in the middle part, but we are expecting over 90% mortality. This picture on the left is from a National Wildlife Refuge here in the Willamette Valley. And it's one of these stands of ash. It's 100% ash trees. And then compare that from a picture on the right. This is what a lot of our ash forests we're expecting to look in about 10 years or so. I mentioned the ash seed. In 2019 is when we started collecting ash seeds from across the range of Oregon ash. We collected from all 4 ecoregions where Oregon ash occurs. I think we had 27 populations and almost 1 million seeds that were collected and provided to researchers. One of the research stations is here in Oregon. It's called Dorena Forest Genetic Resource Center. It's ran by the U.S. Forest Service, and they do genetic testing and breeding for things like Port Orford cedar root disease, white pine blister rust, sudden oak death, and now they have a breeding program that started for Oregon ash. So this winter, we are planning on outplanting, I think, 10,000 seedlings at 4 different test locations to screen for genetic resistance. The forest geneticists tell me that they are expecting 1 in 1,000 survivors. So again, we're going to have these 4 test plantations, 10,000 seedlings, and the plan is to let those seedlings grow and let EAB come through those plantations and look for any survivors. Then we can go back on the landscape and take scions or other material to start a breeding program, a classical breeding program for genetic resistance, to get some material planted back out on the landscape. This program, could take 20, 30 years, but I'm proud that we started it early and that it's continuing right now. So so our readiness and response was the best as it could be, I feel. Since EAB arrived in 2022, we have surveyed over 5,000 trees. We've placed over 1,500 traps since 2008. We're doing over 50 events per year, and over 10,000 people have attended our events. So we are really getting the word out. about EAB. We did a SLAM for the first 2 years. We've released biological control. We're giving workshops on tree injections, and we're also doing gene conservation. So yeah, just to summarize here, EAB was found in 2022 in Oregon. It is spreading now throughout the Willamette Valley. We're expecting significant ash mortality within the next 20 years with impacts to stream ecology and high cost to urban forests. One of our biggest messages is to not move firewood. We have that quarantine on those 5 counties, and we are hoping to find genetic resistance. So I have a whole bunch of fact sheets that we've developed here. This is all on our website, OregonEAB.com. We have all of our state resources like our response plan, identification resources from Oregon State University, and don't move firewood. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maria, and after Maria's done, happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Wyatt, for that excellent introduction to EAB. It'll make my job very easy. I am Maria Marlin, and I am the outreach specialist for the Washington Invasive Species Council. I wanted to first thank the presenters for having me here today. And what I'm going to be doing over the next 15 minutes is sharing with you a little bit about Washington State's preparedness for the emerald ash borer, the threat that this insect will pose to our way of life in Washington, the creation of a resources and management guide, and the importance of including impacts to cultural resources in plant health emergency planning. So that's a pretty ambitious agenda, so we will get started. But first, in case you've never heard of us, the Washington Invasive Species Council was created by the state legislature in 2006, and it's tasked with providing policy-level direction, planning, and coordination related to invasive species management and control. The council consists of representatives from multiple state, federal, municipal agencies, as well as non-governmental organizations and tribal nations. So in short, the council is really just a broad spectrum of experts that are working together collaboratively. And we're also the hub for reporting invasive species sightings in the state, and I'm going to talk about that briefly at the end of the presentation. So the council is staffed by 3 individuals. There's the executive coordinator, and we have a brand new leader starting tomorrow. So we're really excited about that. There's myself, and then there's the program specialist, Jessica LaBelle. And I wanted to give Jessica a huge shout out. The EAB Resources and Management Guide is actually her project. She created the vast majority of these slides. So really appreciative of her and her efforts. She's currently tied up in a different program. So that's why y'all get me today. All right, Wyatt talked about the current spread of EAB and the history of EAB in the country, so I'm not going to touch on that at all. I just wanted to re-emphasize that Washington State does not have any detections of EAB at this time. However, if you recall from Wyatt's presentation, it is very, very close. It is directly to the north of us in British Columbia. It's not even shown here on this map, but very close to the Washington borders. And of course, as you saw, it is in Oregon as well. Again, very close to the Washington border. So we're definitely taking it very seriously, and we're preparing for its arrival. So why does it matter? Well, there could be a whole presentation on why it matters. But to begin with, Washington State produces over $3 billion annually in timber, and it accounts for 25% of the United States log and lumber product exports, and also 9% of US paper exports. Now, obviously, ash trees are only a small part of that, but they're still important. Also at risk are resources that we really can't even put a dollar amount on, such as our environment, the trees and plants in our urban and suburban landscapes, and cultural resources. Fortunately, the news gets even more bleak because there's some challenges here. Now, the first one, and perhaps the main challenge, is that the emerald ash borer was deregulated federally and removed from the United States Department of Agriculture priority pest list. So this is due to the fact that it's become established in so many states, and the management is the responsibility of the landowner. So people in states where EAB is established really need to choose which trees they want to save, and they just risk losing the rest. Now, in states like Washington, where the emerald ash borer is not established, this deregulation severely affected funding available for prevention. And when I say severely, I mean there is none. So the Washington State Department of Agriculture previously conducted surveys for EAB, but had to discontinue due to lack of funding. And now things get a little complicated here, but since the emerald ash borer primarily preys on ash trees in the Fraxinus genus, it is not considered an agricultural pest. But the Washington State Department of Agriculture houses the state plant regulatory official and is responsible for the first detection, identification, and federal reporting. So here's what happens. If emerald ash borer were to be detected in Washington, a specimen would have to be obtained the first time it was found in each county and sent to Washington State Department of Agriculture. They will identify it, and they're going to report it to the federal government, or USDA. But after the initial detections, other organizations are going to have to take the lead. So for example, Washington State University Extension, and this is really, it's a complex process, right? And it's very different than insects that are federally regulated. And this lack of funding to support state response in Washington means that the impacts, the financial impacts, are going to unfortunately fall onto municipalities, landowners, and homeowners. But the good news, there's good news. The good news is that the council and partners are creating a resources and management guide to prepare these entities on how to handle the emerald ash borer if it were to become established here in Washington. So this guide is currently being written. I'm going to talk about that more on the next slide. But here are the different sections that the guide is going to have. So I'll let you scan that for a second. All right, so remember, emerald ash borer has not been found in Washington, but we're taking steps to prepare for it, and it's truly a group effort. The council received a grant from the Washington State Department of Natural Resources as pass-through funding from the United States Forest Service to develop this emerald ash borer resources and management guide. To do that, we formed an interagency working group to develop the guide. And we also partnered with the Samara Group LLC, which is an environmental administrative consulting firm that's going to be designing and managing the development of the guide. Samara Group is a women-owned business that the council has worked with successfully in the past, and it's also involved in EAB response in other states. So they really bring some great expertise to the table. The interagency working group consists of the partners that are listed here. You can see there's state partners, there's federal partners, there's municipalities, and everyone's collaborating to write this guide. And we're modeling the guide and its development after a previous successful project, and that project is known as the Washington State Spotted Lanternfly Action Plan. So I'm going to give just a very brief history about that and how it led to the EAB plan. So spotted lanternfly has not been found in Washington State yet either, but unlike the emerald ash borer, it is federally regulated, so there's funding available for prevention. And the council received a similar grant to convene a working group and collaboratively write this action plan for it. And it was so successful that this is the exact same thing that we're doing for the emerald ash borer guide, and with the same administrative partner, the Samara Group. And I want to highlight one section, which is the inclusion of cultural impacts, because it's a topic that unfortunately is sometimes overlooked in previous action plans for plant health emergencies. And we're going to be including a similar section in the emerald ash borer guide. So a lot of times when we think about plants, especially when we're approaching from, an agricultural perspective, we may think about plants as food. And many of us are learning about first foods and how important they are to tribes, and it's really easy to make the mistake of stopping there. But plants are really important to Indigenous people in a variety of ways. So the spotted lanternfly action plan actually used the term culturally significant ethnobotanicals, and we're going to be using that exact same term in the Emerald Ash Borer Guide. So this term encompasses not just first foods that nourish the body, but also plants used in traditional medicine, for making shelter and clothing, for use in ceremonies and cooking, for making tools and boats. And so there's just this wide variety of cultural aspects that are really at risk from invasive insects such as the emerald ash borer and the spotted lanternfly. So for the spotted lanternfly action plan, and for this emerald ash borer plan, my colleague Jessica LaBelle conducted an extensive literature review to find species of culturally significant ethnobotanicals that are already known. And then she cross-referenced them with the known host plants of spotted lanternfly and then displayed the results in the plan. Now, with a species like the emerald ash borer, this is going to be much easier because we know that their hosts are mostly limited to those in the Fraxinus genus. And we also know, like Wyatt said, that ash trees are culturally important to a number of tribes. So really what we're trying to get at here is that it's really important to include tribal nations and Indigenous communities when preparing for or responding to a plant health emergency, because they can really be heavily impacted and unaware of potential risks from invasive species. So to wrap up, I really wanted to emphasize the role of outreach and education. And yeah, I'm a little biased because I'm the outreach specialist, but it is so important because the role of the individual cannot be understated in invasive species response. There's only a few invasive species professionals on each team throughout the state, and we can't be everywhere at once. So we really need your eyes across the state. We need you to be looking out for this pest. And if you find in Washington what you suspect could be the emerald ash borer, we ask you to please take a picture and report it. You can report it to us in 3 different ways. You can get our free mobile app called the WA Invasives app. You can download that and make a report directly from the app on your tablet or mobile device. You can also use our website. We have a reporting form on our website, or you can email it to invasivespecies@rco.wa.gov. Remember, please take a photo. Please try to take the best photo that you can. I know it's really difficult for our professionals to identify a blurry photo. So please try to take a good photo and save the specimen if you can. The emerald ash borer does not sting, they cannot hurt you, and you can handle them safely. So my next slide is going to have a QR code, but please go by our website for more resources. I have a whole page on emerald ash borer and lots of different Washington-specific resources, free printable fact sheet, an emerald ash borer lookalike guide. Even if you're not in Washington, you might find them helpful. So please feel free to browse our website. You can find that again via this QR code that you can scan at any time. I will leave this up for a second. But that's all I have. I hope you enjoyed this talk, and I hope that you reach out with any questions, and I'm happy to try to answer some now.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you, Wyatt. Both excellent presentations. I know we've had a lot of action in the Q&A just throughout, so if anyone's curious to look at what's already been answered, opening up some time now for any other questions that have yet to be asked. And if there's no questions, I can read some of the ones just for the purposes of the recording. But also I have my own question real quick. So this is for Wyatt. You mentioned that you have a quarantine area for any Ashwood and several other regulated articles. I'm wondering, are there any talks about having a certification program in the state of Oregon for anyone in the state? I mean, I'm unfortunately, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but it's likely that the quarantine area will get bigger over time. And if, industry folks are interested in firewood being able to move across quarantine boundaries or anything like that, obviously that can't happen without heat treatment. So just wondering your thoughts on that.
Okay, yeah, great, thanks. We do have some commercial firewood producers here in Oregon, and so far we haven't had any major pushback from them because a lot of the firewood is conifer. You know, we have in Oregon and probably Washington too, conifer is king, you know, and so a lot of the firewood that's produced by the commercial firewood producers it's not ash. So, and I agree with you that the quarantines are not perfect. For instance, Oregon Department of Agriculture just doesn't have the people to do a lot of the checks and enforcement. But it is a good tool for education and outreach. And you know, we need to have some sort of regulation that tries to slow down the spread. So there will be people that will always follow the rules, and then there's going to be some people that will break the rules. But our mission is to educate and inform people why this matters. You know, not just to have the quarantine, but why is this important? And to just educate as many people about that. So there has been, for several years, there have been talks about having a firewood certification program here in Oregon. But with most things, it comes down to funding, and creating new positions is kind of a struggle sometimes in government agencies. It's not to say it's not a good idea, but there are talks happening right now behind the scenes with ODA and ODF and some other agencies, again, about getting some sort of firewood certification program going. So we need some stable funding to make that happen. And there's some creative ideas on how to make that happen. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question fully, but.
Yeah, no, it's you answered it perfectly. Thank you. Just for context, we keep track of every regulation that affects firewood movement, whether it be a specific firewood quarantine or a pest-based quarantine under which firewood's a regulated article, on our firewood comparison report on our website, which Lee might be able to drop in the chat for everybody. And we also, in that report, keep track of what states have a certification program, whether it be state-based, well, if it's state-based or not. And I know that there are some states who don't have a state-based program, but can still certify kilns based on a federally regulated pest like spongy moth or something like that. So I know that that can be an avenue for some folks as well. Okay, definitely have some questions here in the chat. Looks like folks want this one to be answered live. So great session. Any news on the success of EAB biocontrol agent releases in Oregon? What does short and long-term management success look like? Thank you.
Well, for biocontrol, we have some tentative positive news. What we're trying to do with these releasing thousands of these individuals is get a sustaining population of biocontrol agents. We haven't got really good numbers on that yet. This fall, Oregon Department of Agriculture, who's the lead for the biocontrol, they've developed some survey techniques where they've harvested bolts. Those bolts with EAB and hopefully parasitoids are now in emergence cages. And so over the coming months, we hope to get some information on whether biocontrol agents have established on their own. But in the meantime, ODA is working with USDA APHIS to continue to receive more of those biocontrol agents, to continue releasing them. So it's only a matter of time until we get some recovery from that. They will get established here eventually with all of the releases that we're doing. And yeah, it is a very important part of integrated pest management strategy. So what does the short-term success look like? It would be getting biocontrol established. And then long-term is distributing more biocontrol agents across the landscape as EAB spreads, as well as the long-term, for me, the long-term success is getting genetic resistance in Fraxus latifolia. So both of those, we've got a good start on both of those.
Okay, it looks like a lot of questions are being answered just right in the Q&A. So just for the purposes of the recording, I'm going to look through and see if I can read out some of these just for folks who can't see them.
Hi, my apologies for interrupting. So this is Lee Greenwood, and I am in the process of archiving the Q&A so that we can just put a PDF of it, because there's a lot of amazing information in there.
Okay,
and we're
perfect.
going to we're gonna run out of time to read them out loud just because our presentation was so great.
I do have so it says one question is, when's the best time to see EAB? And well, for the adults, it will be in the summer, and we seem to be getting our peak emergence is around the 1st of July. So adults will start emerging in June, but peak at the first part of July is when we really see them on our traps. But for the larvae, you can survey 12 months out of the year, basically, for the galleries, the larvae themselves. So, but you have to get permission to chop into a tree. So, well, hope that answers that question.
Okay. We have another one here. Is EAB infestation in Oregon mainly due to firewood movement or other pathways?
That's a really good question. We think that's firewood or some other solid wood packing material. But if you look in the literature, EAB can also be transported in nursery stock as small as 1-inch caliber, or maybe even smaller. 1-inch diameter tree saplings can be hosts for EAB. And so that's another avenue that EAB could be spreading around, although in the nursery trade, ash is declining and in demand. So, but both of those are two ways that EAB can be spread through humans, through solid wood like firewood or other untreated wood like pallets and crates, but also the nursery stock. We just don't know exactly how it's spreading right now.
Yeah. And just also for folks who may not be as familiar with this, we get a lot of responses on social media like, these insects have wings, they're flying around, obviously, and I don't know the exact mileage, but these these bugs can only go, a couple miles in their lifetime, correct? I mean, it's definitely not something that can go from the East Coast to the West.
The vast majority of the adults will fly less than a mile. They'll just attack the same tree if there's still enough food left in that tree, or maybe to a neighboring tree. But on the bell curve, you do have some of these that are pretty long distance dispersers, over 5 miles is possible. But that's the exception. Most of them will spread less than a mile on their own.
Yep. Okay. Let me see here. Lee's answering that one.
Well, I would just say we are out of time.
Oh my gosh, we're out of time. Thank you. It's like there's so many to read through.
But for the last question, I will, because I'm on, I will say, can someone give an update on emerald ash borer, I assume, spread in British Columbia? We did that, I believe, last year. I would look up that information online, and it's a really good topic for a future webinar, but we have run out of time right now. And the short answer, if anybody isn't familiar with it, is that emerald ash borer was found in British Columbia and is spreading, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you again to Wyatt and Maria. Thank you so much. And for the other folks from Oregon who have been answering questions in the question and A feature. Really appreciate you guys joining us today and providing this information. It's really important to keep on track of this, and things can just change so fast. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for everyone who showed up. The recording will be posted by tomorrow, and we hope to have the slides up as well on our website. So that's all, folks. Have a great rest of your week.
So much, everyone.
Take care.